Hi, my name is Frances Glad. I'm the chair of the Santa Cruz County Democratic Party. Today is very exciting. We are sitting here today with Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, representative for LD21. Welcome, a representative to Santa Cruz County and to the 520 Democrat podcast.
Thank you so much. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
So I'm going to ask you a very few questions, and they're pretty broad. So you represent our legislative district in the state legislature. If we were looking at a map, what area does your district cover?
That's an incredible question because Legislative District 21 is a mixture of both urban and rural. It is one of the few districts that encompasses such a wide territory with 3 counties. The makeup is with 3 counties. So you'll get the center of Tucson down to the south part of the city, and then you hit that I-19 corridor, and we go through Sarita, just a little bit of Green Valley, but Tubac, Rio Rico, Amado, all the way down to Nogales. And then if you jog a little bit west, you've got Arivaca and Sasabe. And then coming across the border to the east, it goes up into Cochise County with Naco and Bisbee.
That feels like a very big area. How many representatives does LD21 have at the state legislature?
So every district, and so there's 30 districts, so LD21 has 2 representatives that serve in the House and 1 senator that serves in the Senate. So altogether, you have 3 individuals representing you at the state legislature.
And what do state representatives do, and how does that help Santa Cruz County?
Oh, that's such a good question. So the state representatives and state senator are responsible first and foremost to determine the budget for the state of Arizona. And within that budget, we've got 3 big areas. One is education, or public school education. The other is in the healthcare field, which encompasses insurance and a few other areas. And then also our criminal justice system. And then throughout infrastructure, so like roads and bridges, one of the things that has gone into infrastructure as well now is broadband. And then we're looking at also adding charging stations for, as part of the road infrastructure for a move towards electric vehicles. But we do the broad sweeps and then collaborate with the county and the cities and towns.
Representative, are you aware that Santa Cruz County has our broadband has terrible infrastructure? That is one of the things that we are rooting for here in Santa Cruz. So please continue.
Yes, that is one of the things I speak out about quite a bit, that, as a part of our infrastructure, especially our spaces in rural Arizona. So absolutely for Santa Cruz County, but, you look at your rural areas in Cochise. You get up into the northeastern part of our state as well. So I am a champion for getting broadband installed here, especially in Santa Cruz County.
How long have you been a representative for our district?
So I'm just finishing my 2nd year because of redistricting, but I am finishing my 4th year in the Arizona State Legislature. So every 10 years when the census happens, after the census, our state goes in and redraws our legislative district lines, the different districts within each county based upon population. They try to have and roughly right around 250,000 voters in an area. And so this last time with redistricting in 2021, where I live got drawn into Legislative District 21. And so I have been representing the new parts of to me. I have a few, I've got quite a few precincts from my old district, but it was joined in with a lot of the precincts and area from the old LD2. So they joined us, and I have been representing you for 2 years specifically. But honestly, as a state legislator, we try to make laws that will impact and be useful for the whole state of Arizona. And I have always shown up with an eye to rural Arizona. My first 9 years of my life were spent in rural Arizona, so it is where I began my life. Those early formative years were formed and homegrown in rural Arizona.
Thank you. A little feedback that we continue to encounter while speaking to our community members is that we do not share the good things that our elected Democrats do. If you could choose one or a couple things that you are proud of while being a rep, what would that be?
Oh, that's such a good question. So, well, specifically, for Nogales, Senator Gabaldon and I worked very collaboratively to get some money into our roads, especially like the Ruby Road Exchange, with an eye to cross-border traffic and being able to have passage, especially for the produce that comes in and gets processed here, right? On the U.S. side of the border, we dove in and worked hard to get those asks in the last legislative budget, which were approved. Beyond that, there have been quite a few things, and one of the areas that I have spent the most time dealing with has been the issue of water in Arizona and how critical that is for our state's survival and future, and working hard to put in sustainable policies. It's a little bit hard, you're right. It's hard because we are not in the majority, and our votes in the House have to get to 31 and in the Senate to 16. And sometimes that's a hard feat when folks are so divided on this issue. But because of the time that I have spent in the rural parts, and especially southern Arizona, working hard on learning about the issues, creating relationships, I have to say some of the stuff that I've done outside of committee work and floor work has been to connect with our constituents, to develop those relationships. And now we are positioned, and especially this year, I think we've got some big things coming on water, and it has been an absolute privilege to be at the helm working hard for creating better water rights for our folks in Arizona.
I thank you for that. Can I ask you, when you say that we are not in the majority, what could you explain that to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the House of Representatives, because each legislative district has 2 representatives, so we've got 30 districts with 2 representatives apiece, we have 60 members in the House. And in the Senate, we have 30 members. And when policy goes up on the board for a vote, a simple majority wins, and that legislation passes out of each chamber. So in the House, because of 60, you need half plus 1. So you need 31 votes to cause any legislation to pass out of the House. In the Senate, you need 16 votes. So half of 30 is 15. Plus 1 is 16. And then, of course, you need the governor's signature. So it's 31, 16, and 1 that gets something put into law.
Thank you for that explanation. At least in my opinion, that's why we need to work. We need to work hard to get that.
Right. And if I can add to that, I should explain further. Well, we have 29 Democrats and there are 31 Republicans. So again, getting to 31, a lot of times it's hard for Democrats to get those 2 extra votes from the Republican Party. It does happen, but it's extremely hard. And because of that, a lot of our policy doesn't even get heard in committee. Our bills that we drop get assigned, but the chair people never hear them because they are in the majority. And that's the first hurdle, is getting your bills heard in committee. So, and in the Senate, it's the same. There are 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. We just need to flip 2 seats in each chamber and we are in the majority. If we flip 1, it's parity. And still, you need that 16 for legislation to pass, and you need 31 for legislation to pass. So if it was 30-30, it doesn't pass. If it's 15-15, it doesn't pass. And then you really have to work hard in negotiating. So you're right. We are so close. We can almost taste it.
Yes. Oh, we will be there.
Right.
Yes, we
right.
will.
Yes, that's true.
So I was reading through your website, and your background is fascinating. Let me see, and I have a small list here. You are an ordained minister. You coach cross country and were involved with the school garden program, where you were a substitute teacher.
Right.
And you were heavily involved with Save Our Schools. But my first question is, are you a cross country runner?
Not currently. I used to be. I have flirted with running my whole life, but I will tell you where I fell in love with running, and that was when I was in elementary school. I spent my early childhood years, I mentioned in rural Arizona, but I spent my early childhood years on the Navajo reservation. And we, just stepped out our front door and had all these wide open spaces just to run. And as little kids, that's what we did. And at the elementary level, those schools up there had cross-country teams. And so my love of running, was instilled in me in the wide open spaces of northeastern Arizona. And, throughout my life, different times, I have competed in half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, and just recently, I've agreed with some of my colleagues to start training for another 5K. So I'm not currently a cross-country runner, but we're getting ready to get started again.
And I was so fascinated by that because my brothers are runners.
Right.
But I make an excellent bystander. I am awesome at holding those signs.
We all have a role to play, right?
Yes. Throwing water at them. Shoot. And can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to Save Our Schools?
Well, Save Our Schools came into my life at a time where I had been, for years, working hard for my local public neighborhood school. I am married to a public school teacher, the daughter of parents who began their teaching careers in northeastern Arizona. My husband is a third-generation Arizona teacher. All of our siblings are married to educators. It is the family trade, and it is what we believe so strongly in, that, public school education should be and is meant for all children, and that it is the great equalizer of helping people reach their potential no matter where they start out in life. And so I, when my first child began school in kindergarten in 2007, I was asked to serve on the school site council, which at that point was the decision-making body of how to spend and allocate the school's resources. 2008, the recession hit, and budgets, the education funding started to get swept. And for 4 years in a row, the site council had to make the new numbers work. And every year there was a decrease in funding. And so we had to make the difficult decision of figuring out which staff members we were going to say goodbye to, which programs we were going to eliminate. All the while, my children were, I started out with my first, but then my other children were quickly, starting and beginning school. And so, from those early years, and that's where I was volunteering as a cross-country coach, as, working in the after-school garden program, because that was such an incredible, for me, I think it's such an incredible program to ground our children, in the earth and knowing how to grow their own food and how to create rich soil. That's a big part of our future, creating places where we can create life, right? And it just broke my heart every year, and I found it increasingly frustrating. And so, I just continued to lean in. But by the time my oldest was in 5th grade, our neighborhood school was on the closure list. And so we had 3 weeks, and I gathered a bunch of mamas in my backyard, and we crafted a plan to keep that school open, and went to work and printed T-shirts. We had talking points. We got people to the meetings. And then they closed our school.
Oh,
But that was in 2012, and that was the starting point. And it was in that process that I realized how the state legislature determined the funding for our public schools. And so I started paying attention to what was coming out of the legislature. And by the time Save Our Schools, came around, I was right there on the front lines collecting signatures to get out that no vote in 2018 for the voucher expansion. And in 2018, they came to me and said, we want you to be our regional lead for Southern Arizona. And so I had this lived experience. I had been paying attention. I had started going up to the legislature to advocate. And I was like, yes, put me in, coach. I'm ready.
I'm actually so happy that you were a member or a part of Save Our Schools, because at least in our community, they have been doing excellent work in educating our community. Now, one of the things is that in Santa Cruz County, or at least in Nogales, I have witnessed, because I have a child in elementary, and so I too see where the need is. And sometimes, yes, and even here in Nogales, we have pushback about the funding. And I wasn't aware that the legislator was part of how that money gets distributed. But then it also falls into NUSD, right? Or not just NUSD, but the school boards, who then use the money for budgeting for schools. So if there's anything, by the way, I'd like to point out that I did, I went into RTS, which is the request to speak at our legislators, and I noticed that there were these bills that it was just mind-boggling in the most negative way. So I was going to ask you if there's anything that you feel that you should that our community should be aware of, that in regards to our public school systems, that perhaps we do not know. Is there anything that they?
There's so much, but let's start from the 30,000-foot view. And that right now, most of what we are battling or dealing with or having are challenged by is this idea that pits the public schools against the parents, and that public schools are there to undermine our parents. That is the mentality. And so our public schools for years now have been under attack with this idea that charter schools and private schools and private religious schools are better than what our children are getting in public schools. And in order to hammer that point home, they've instilled a mechanism of testing to look at metrics. Well, first of all, let's back up. Public schools are not in competition with parents. Public schools see their role as educating children and partnering with parents to make sure each child reaches their potential. I could have never been that parent to homeschool my children. I don't know enough about all of the subjects. I might have some subjects that I am 100% spot on. I know my stuff, but there's no way I know everything to teach my child everything. Therefore, I rely on those adults who are partnering with me to make sure my child is getting a well-rounded education. So first and foremost, but the narrative that strikes fear in a parent's heart is our public schools are undermining a parent's authority. That is not true. And nowhere is it in statute. So this is a false narrative that is creating fear. So if somebody, if this talking point comes up, question it. Think critically about that. And then secondly, I lost my train of thought because I had delved down another road. But we're not in competition with the parents. But secondly, this idea of testing is going to produce our metrics. Well, first of all, our private schools are not held to the same standard. They if they have to administer a test, they don't have to report the results. And our public schools have to teach all learners. And so they have children, and we know that children learn differently. We have all kinds of different types of learners, and not every child is suited for test taking. I was one of those children that did not perform well on tests. But I was inquisitive, I was engaged, I loved learning, but I had a fair amount of test anxiety and did not perform well on tests. And my teachers would scratch their heads and say, well, I know you know the content because of the way you communicate in class. And so this one-dimensional metric of saying how schools are performing based upon how children perform on a test. And also what we know about tests, a lot of times tests are skewed to favor not only one type of learner, but one type of social, cultural setting. That a lot of our children who come from communities of color, come from impoverished communities, the test examples are not skewed to speak to them, not their cultural context, not their economic context, not their social context. And so already these tests are slighted to highlight one type of learner and one type of person. It's not equitable. And so for me, I have pushed hard to step away from testing as the metric and talk about levels of engagement. How do we look at levels of engagement and look at our schools and judge them on that? Are the children inquisitive? Have they made strides in their reading? Have they gone from one place to the next? Not are they reaching a certain metric? Because that's the other thing. Children's brains develop at their own pace. And while a child might struggle with certain fundamentals in reading in first grade, by the time they're in third grade, they may have mastered it because in second grade there was a huge leap. And that may or may not be based upon their teacher, but it may very well be based on brain development. So I think the metrics by which we choose to grade schools, I think, is off and it is not accurate. And it doesn't adequately speak to how our children's brains develop and how they develop as human beings and as learners. So those are some of the things that I'd like to say about our schools and what we are dealing with, because already, the narrative is skewed to create fear in parents' hearts and then to not critique fairly what's happening in our schools, because we are not taking the whole child into perspective when we're looking at education.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. Speaking of children's minds.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to another topic, and that is that recently, in response to developing mining operations in the Patagonia Mountains, you urged the federal government to impose measures that would limit the release of manganese into the air, a subject that is very concerning to us all in Santa Cruz County and the rest of Arizona. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking. Yeah, this was, boy, oh boy, we're in a space of tension right now. Arizona has long been proud of the mining industry as, especially mining copper as one of the 5 C's that we have to offer. And yet, over time, what we've learned about mining in our state is that if we do not first and foremost think about our public health, things go sideways. If you look up at the Navajo Reservation and all of the uranium mining that was happening up there, that has contaminated the water, it has polluted the ground, and we now are on 4 or 5 generations of birth defects and health issues because mining was not done with public health at the forefront. And what we know about manganese is that it is a neurotoxin, which means it brain development, right? Mm-hmm. It's crucial. It does damage to the brain. And the tension, though, the tense space that we are in, those of us who appreciate Mother Earth, and I consider myself not just a conservationist, but an environmentalist, that we really need to think about honoring the earth, and not just because of what we can consume from it, but because of the life that the earth produces, and that if we do our job to take care of the earth is going to do her job in taking care of us. And so there is a big push and thinking about clean and green energy. A lot of that new energy and new technology that we are pushing for requires us to mine minerals from the earth, and that's a hard space to be in because fossil fuels, we know, are catastrophically horrible, and so they've discovered that manganese helps the life of batteries. So if you're talking about solar panels, if you're talking about electric vehicles, that an injection of manganese in that material makes batteries go longer. However, we can never sacrifice our public and our personal health for the sake of technology. And so we are in a bind. And, manganese is listed as a hazardous air pollutant with the EPA. But because manganese is not mined in the United States, first of all, we don't know. I don't know personally. I can't say if we know the quality of the manganese, at the site where it's going to be mined. We don't know that. And whether it's going to be of a grade that we can use in the batteries, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That information hasn't been given to us just yet. But because it's listed as a hazardous air pollutant, we know that we need to take precautions. However, the EPA does not have a number for ambient air quality, of what is that concentration in the air, and especially in particular at the place where this is mined. And so that was an area where I could step in and write a bill that we don't determine it as a state, but the bill is a House Concurrent Memorial, which it's real archaic language. But essentially, if that had have gotten a hearing in committee and passed out of both chambers and signed by the governor, it would have been a postcard to the EPA to say, hey, look, Arizona is going to start doing something in the United States that we aren't doing. We think it would be best to have those air quality standards in place so that we can protect our people. And of course, that bill did not get a hearing. And I think, and not just at the mining, because I've talked with the people of the mines, they assure everything is going to be done underground, enclosed. The manganese will never see the light, touch the air. It'll always be encased. And that's a great plan, and I appreciate that, but accidents happen. We know this. And once the manganese is pulled from the ground, it has to be processed, which means somewhere that manganese is going to touch air. And so not only is it concerning that we're starting to dig for this, but it is also concerning that this has to be processed. Are we processing that in the United States? We don't have any facilities built because we've never done that. Are we going to ship it overseas and then have it imported back? There's so many questions to answer. And so I thought, well, the bare minimum, we should at least have an understanding of concentration levels for our public's safety.
Wow. If only we had more of our leaders thinking the same way. Now, do you see hope that in the near future we will find balance between mining, public health, and environmental conservation? What can the legislator do to reach that point? And what can we, the voters, do to support you and other electeds reach that point?
All great questions. So let me let me break it down. I see hope? Well, the thing that I know about hope is that it is hard earned. Hope is not just an idea that you have, but it is the linking of hands. It is bringing people together to do the hard work to create a different path. And what we know right now is that we so desperately need to create a different path. I do believe that we not necessarily strike a balance, but I think we can find that sweet spot with public health and mining as we move towards sustainable energy. That is 100% renewable and clean. But again, that is going to take hard work, and it is going to take the political will of the people to sit down at a table and have the hard conversations, and for us to be able to say no and mean it. Now, right now, what we have in power in the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committees and in power as far as the chamber are people who really don't want to have those conversations, nor do they want to allow us to have them. Which brings me to the point in that we are heading into an election season, and we have an opportunity here to find those candidates that want to protect our people, want good things for our people, want opportunity for our people without sacrificing the public health. We know we can find who those candidates are, we can get behind them, and we can work hard to make sure that they get elected and that we elect enough of them that the power dynamic is shifted, that, the Democrats have at least 31 in the House, and that the Democrats have at least 16 in the Senate. So yes, I know that it is possible, but I would implore people to come together and make that hope a reality.
Thank you. And also, you're getting reelected this year. And we will see your name on that ballot. Are you running traditional? And what does that mean? What does traditional mean? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's good. No, it's a good question. Yes, I am working hard now to get on that ballot. And I am running traditional. There are two options when it comes to campaign finance. And it's very important, for people to figure out how to get into the website and pay attention to campaign finance so you can see where a candidate's money is coming from, who is supporting them. I am running traditional, which means I can accept money from political action committees, from PACs, and the amount, as well as individual donations. The amount of money, there's a limit for PAC donations and individual contributions, and that limit is $5,400. There's a cap. The other way with campaign finance that a candidate could run is called clean. And that means you don't accept any money from political action committees. You don't accept money from lobbyists. And you're individual, you only receive individual contributions, and the max amount anybody can donate is $500. And so, a lot of people say, well, why don't you run clean? I absolutely support running clean. I believe in campaign transparency. You can go in and you can look. You can see that I have filed my campaign finance reports on time, that I disclose everything. And even if it's $5 that somebody gives me, and I'm not required to, I declare that $5 and I put a name on that $5. People need to know where my money is coming from. And they need to hold it up with the other candidates running in this district where their money is coming from. However, the way we are funded, and interestingly enough, it was the Republicans who started campaign finance and started running clean, but they have since passed laws so that you have to raise $15,000, and with that $15,000, it is matched by another $15,000 from the Clean Elections Fund. You only have $30,000 to run a campaign, and that, in all honesty, is not enough money to win the seat. To win a seat in LD21 in the state legislature, it costs about $75,000 to run a campaign that is effective enough to win. You cannot win with anything less. And that's the hard part for me. But that is why it's my commitment, and I always have committed to filing on time. And down to $5, I report and I put names on every donation that comes into me, because I believe that's important to be held accountable and for you, the voters, to be able to see where my money is coming from.
Wow, that much. Wow.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. And I think I thank you to everyone who does run for our legislator, because that's actually something new to me. I was not aware it takes that much. I mean, I've always known it takes a lot of money, but that much. So we're going on to the last question. The only question that I have for you now is there anything else that you would like to share? The open floor on you.
I do this because it is a calling to me. I am here for the people. There is not enough reward for me to do this for myself. I am here because the people in my community need somebody to show up on their behalf to stand for what is just, to stand for compassion, and to make laws that provide a future that we can be proud of for our children and our children's children. I am accessible. Please go onto my website, stahlhamilton4az.com. There's a contact us button if you would like to ask me a question. That email comes to me. I am accessible. I have an open door. Francis can tell you that. And while you're on there, if you want to sign up for my weekly newsletter, it's every Friday. I try to put out just something that I've been thinking about that talks about what it's like to be a legislator, also what it's like to be a candidate. You'll get a mixture of both, but it's me writing those every Friday just to give you a little bit of a window of what I'm up to or what I've been thinking about. But I am absolutely here for you.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us and sharing your stories. And with that, I wish you the best of luck in this coming election.
Thank you for this time. It's been a joy to be with you.
Same, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you.